2, 3, 4. Okay. And Natasha, is it worth it if we haven't got 5?
Well, you've got to do YouTube.
We are now live streaming.
Right.
Yes.
So what we need to do is you just need to open the meeting. If we aren't quorate, then we'll have to adjourn for a few moments.
Okay, and wait for people to join. Okay, so then, thank you, Natasha. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the public watching us on the YouTube link. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. Tuesday, the 9th of March at 6:30, obviously by Zoom webinar. I am Councillor Jean Douglas and I chair the Audit and Standards Committee. I can confirm that the following members are present and participating in this remote meeting. We have Councillor Prue Chandler, Councillor Robert Child, Councillor Alan Hewson, and Councillor Jacob Wilkinson as Vice Chair, and myself, obviously, Jean Douglas as Chair. So we do have 5 members and we are now quorate. We are expecting a few more members and they may be following on and joining us later. We also have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance. These are the Director for Corporate Services, Dawn Garton, the Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, Kieran Stockley, the Head of Internal Audit, Rachel Ashley Cornt, the Democratic Services Manager, Natasha Taylor, and the Democratic Services Officer, Catherine Richards. So welcome to all members of staff there. This meeting is being held in public, and as I've said already, we do welcome those members of the public who are watching us on YouTube. Any member participating by remote link who declares an interest in any item of business in terms which requires them to leave the room must ensure that they cannot be seen or heard during the agenda item. This shall be confirmed by Democratic Services. This member of staff will confirm to the remote member when they may rejoin the meeting. Should any aspect of the conference link fail during this meeting, I will call a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the link can quickly be re-established. If the link cannot be re-established, the meeting shall be adjourned to a later date. In the event of link failure for individual members, the remote members will be deemed to have left the meeting at the point of failure of the equipment. And if the link cannot be re-established before the end of the meeting, then the presumption will be that the meeting shall continue to deal with the item, providing the meeting remains quorate. That means 5 members of the members of the council. Should the meeting no longer be quorate, the meeting shall be adjourned and any remaining items of business will be deferred. If the individual member's link is successfully re-established, then the remote members will be deemed to have returned at the point of re-establishment. I would ask members to indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand using the raise hand facility on the Zoom application. I will then invite each member in turn to make their contribution to the debate. In order to ensure all members have the opportunity to speak, no contribution shall exceed 5 minutes. Before proceeding to any vote, I will ensure that all members and officers have no further comments by confirming with the technical host of the webinar that no hands are raised. I will ask each member to indicate when asked whether they are voting for, against, or abstaining. This will be recorded by the Democratic Services Officer, who will confirm the outcome of the vote. Any member who has been absent for the debate on a particular item due to a link failure must abstain from the vote on that item. Okay, so we'll move on to the agenda then, ladies and gentlemen. Item number 1, apologies for absence. So I have received apologies officially from Chris Fisher. I'm just going through the list in front of me very carefully. Councillor Chris Evans was going to substitute, but is no longer substituting. Ronan as a substitute sent his apologies, he couldn't substitute. Okay, I think they are all the apologies I've received. Has anybody else received any apologies for this evening, for the meeting?
I thought Councillor Evans was a member of the audit committee and not a substitute.
Yes, I checked back in my records too, Councillor Child, and I discovered that he is indeed, Chris Evans is indeed, originally he was a full member, but then Don Pritchett seemed to substitute for him. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but actually Chris
Councillor
Evans.
Douglas?
Yes.
Do you want me to just clarify? Is that
yes,
right?
Please.
Regarding the membership, there is still a vacancy left by Councillor Pritchett. We haven't had formal notification yet on who will take that opposition group seat, but we do expect to receive that shortly.
Oh, so Chris Evans was sorry, not Chris Evans, but who is actually on the original list? Natasha, have you got a list down there? I've got mine. Yeah, I've got mine as having Chris Evans on it for this year.
No, it was Councillor Pritchett that was on it, and then there was a vacancy created by Councillor Pritchett.
Oh, okay.
And we are just waiting for confirmation of who's going to take that seat. So
okay,
we'll get that confirmation shortly. Okay,
I have him down as an original member, so I'll have to go back and check my original records too. But anyway, yeah, we are quorate, so we can move swiftly on. It could be that other members may join us as the meeting progresses. So no other apologies for absence. So we'll move on to item number 2 for the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2021. So I have read these, and hopefully members will have time to do so too. I would personally like to propose them, but over to members. Would you like to comment on them? Are there any amendments, questions? And would anybody like to second them as well, please?
I'll second it.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Child. Would any other members like to comment? Oh, Councillor Glancy is with us now. Hello, Councillor Glancy. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you. Great. So we're on the minutes of the last meeting, Councillor Glancy. And we're just asking if anybody wants to comment. And I'm looking, we have had a seconder, Councillor Child. I'm just checking the hands up. No hands have been raised. No hands raised. So, okay, so we do need to vote on the minutes. We need to go through each member from the list I have here. Whether you would want to vote for or against the minutes. Okay, so if I can start with Councillor Chandler, would you like to vote for or against the minutes?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Child?
For.
Councillor Glancy?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hewson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
For.
Thank you. And myself, as Councillor Douglas, for. I don't think I need to.
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Yes. Thank you, Natasha, for democratic services. Okay, so they have been approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, declarations of interest. So here I invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. So do we have anyone wishing to declare interests? No hands raised on the Hayes Grant facility. So, okay, that's fine then. So we shall move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 4, the internal audit update. We have this at most meetings. So I'd like to introduce Rachel Ashley-Cornt, who is the head of internal audit, to provide a brief introduction to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you said, this is our regular report that the committee will be familiar with. So the full copy of the report is provided in the appendix. I'll just take you through some of the key headlines within the report. So of your audit plan for 2020-21, we now have all of your assignments underway or complete. So we are hoping to be on track to meet our target of 90% complete by the end of March. We do have a number of audits that do have to be completed at the end of the year, particularly around the financial system. So we're full steam ahead on those at the moment, and hoping to get as much as we possibly can done before the end of the financial year. Anything that is finalised from this point forward will be brought to the committee as part of my annual report at the next committee meeting. So you will still receive the outcomes of all of those remaining assignments. So at the time of producing this report, we had 2 further reports that had been issued as final. So these are summarised for you within the body of the report as usual, in section 2.5. So starting on page 3, there is an audit on the lifeline income. So this was looking at the various streams of income in relation to the lifeline service, just to give some assurance over how we reconcile that to our customer list, to make sure that debts are recovered appropriately, and that key controls are being exercised. So as you can see from the findings of the audit, there were no significant areas of concern, but we have made some recommendations to try and strengthen some of those financial controls a little bit further. And on that basis, we've given a satisfactory assurance rating for the design of the controls pending some of those actions, but we've given a good level of assurance overall for the compliance with what's currently in place. So there's no significant risks to highlight to the committee's attention in relation to that audit, and obviously it's quite specific to a very small part of the council's income. The second audit that we've summarised for you this evening is in relation to ethics and equalities. So this was looking at the council's ethical governance framework, some of those key policies that make up that framework, and some of the processes and procedures that underpin those policies and support them in practice. So we're looking at things here such as your whistleblowing policy, making sure that's up to date and compliant with good practice, looking at things like declaring interests, and all of the things we'd expect in terms of ethical ways of working. But we also looked at equalities in relation to things like equal pay, so reviews in relation to that we have to do on a statutory basis to make sure that those had all been complied with, and also in relation to equalities, so how those are considered in relation to decision making, so things like your equality impact assessments that members may see on other items in relation to some key decisions that are being made. So overall, again, we've given a good assurance opinion, which should be reassuring to yourselves as an audit and governance effectively committee, so you're responsible for a number of those policies. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance on that. So again, overall, no areas of particular concern to highlight to the committee this evening, and nothing that would impact on my annual assurance opinion. So that's a good place to be at this point in the year. So the full audit plan is provided as usual in Appendix 1 from page 6 of the supporting full report. So against each of the assignments is an update on the progress, the stage of delivery of each of those audits, and the outcomes of those that have been finalised. So all of those, apart from those 2 on the agenda this evening, have already been reported to this committee at previous meetings. Also, just within the report, just to finish off, we've also given you an update on the implementation of audit recommendations. So these are provided in Appendix 3 and Appendix 4. So as you can see in Appendix 3, the number of overdue recommendations is currently at 10. I have included an additional line in the table, this time as requested by councillors at the last meeting, to split out those which are over 3 months overdue and those which are over 6 months overdue. So that's the first time that you've seen those separated out. Unfortunately, in this report, that doesn't make much difference because they were all 6 months overdue. So I've got an empty over 3 months line, but hopefully that will give you a little bit more analysis going forward. So of those 3 that were high priority in over 3 months, you have a full update in Appendix 4 of the report. These are 3 that I did bring to you at the last meeting, but hopefully members will be pleased to see that we have had a number that have been implemented, particularly those in relation to right to buy that have now disappeared off there because they are complete. And all of those that remain do have revised dates for implementation, which we will be following up. And I do hope that we have at least a couple of those complete before I produce the annual report for you for the next meeting. So that's a quick run through for you of the report, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a good explanation. Yeah, I mean, I shall open the debate to members. I'll be looking for a proposer and seconder throughout the debate. So I'm just seeing if anybody's got their hands raised. Oh, Councillor Robert Child has his hands raised. So we shall start with Robert. Yes, Councillor Child, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. Thanks for just pointing out the rows it actually in as I requested. It just actually shows you that rather than being over 3 months, it is over 6 months, and the clarity from that is fine. The 3 high priority actions which are outstanding, you've got end of March, May and June. You've got the Director of Housing and Communities. He'll be leaving shortly. How confident are you on the May and June dates at this stage?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to respond to that. So yes, obviously that's something that we are mindful of. I am reassured that, particularly in relation to the second and the third of the actions, that those are being progressed by officers at a T3, I suppose, level within the authority. So I hope that those do remain on track. In terms of the HRI business case and whether there's any business plan and whether there's any implication for that from the change of senior management, I'm not in a position to confirm, but obviously we will continue to seek updates on that. And we have, as you can see on the next agenda item, we have actually included an audit of that in the next year's audit plan. So if we will be able to follow that up in full within the next 12 months, and hopefully that gives the committee a little bit of assurance on that one. Obviously, when we do have a change in any senior management position, I will always have a handover and an introductory meeting with the new post holder. So I will make sure that they're fully briefed on any outstanding audit recommendations at that point, and that they're in a position to take those forward. So I'll do everything I can to try and support that implementation. And obviously the latest update I've been given is what's reflected in the report.
Okay, thanks very much, Rachel.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Councillor Child, do you have any further points or questions you'd like to raise?
No. I mean, Rachel had said at previous meetings that she was fairly sure her team would get most of the audit, or would get all the audits completed. And I've got complete faith in you, Rachel.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Child. I do too. Okay, we do have a further hands raised. Councillor Hewson. Yes, Alan, if you would like to go ahead, we're all ready.
Okay, just on the asbestos surveys and things, if the problem's been caused through the lockdown, is it still going to be an ongoing problem through to the end of the year? So we're not going to get full completion of it.
So through you, Chair, obviously the latest update that I've been given by the Housing Service is that they're on track to deliver that timeframe that's been given. Okay. So I don't believe that any of the restrictions have changed since I was given that update, because it was in a matter of weeks ago. So that continues to be what I'm being told. Hopefully that will remain on track, but as to whether or not there'll be 1 or 2 properties that they still struggle to access, we shall have to see.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Councillor Hewson, for your useful question. Councillor Chandler, you've just come back and rejoined us. I think we lost you for a while. We're discussing the internal audit update. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand, just so you know where we are. I was pleased to, I shall contribute at this point as a member rather than a chair. I was pleased to see that 100% of planned assignments are complete or in progress, and there are only really 2 that we're really focusing on. As Rachel said, you know, we are not at 90% of success at the moment. So that is a fantastic achievement considering the year we've had, and the audit team have been incredibly challenged this year, and they've rose to a splendid, I suppose, phase of activity as they've dealt with the COVID crisis, issuing business grants and so forth. So I am amazed that they've achieved what they have against this original audit plan, and I would like to personally thank them. They've worked very well together, they've pulled together, and it is quite astounding, really. They've even started work on the 11 overdue management actions as well, I'm pleased to see. And I'm pleased to see that there's an update on the ethics and equalities, as Rachel explained, which is a requirement, has been identified to address the specific legislative requirements such as gender pay gap and fair pay reporting and so on. And nice to see Rachel's included the 3 and 6 months columns as we asked last time, even though it's not relevant this time, it will be in the future. So I think that's going to be really useful as the time goes forwards and time unfolds. Do members have any further points, questions? No further hands are raised on that. No? Okay, so well, in that case, I would like to propose them. Could I have a seconder for those? Let me just go back to the original proposal. Is to note the report and progress made by the internal audit team in the delivery of the audit plan. So we just need a proposer and seconder. We don't need to vote on this. So I propose, and Councillor, oh, we've got 2 actually. We've got Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Child. Councillor Wilkinson did raise his hand officially, so Councillor Wilkinson as Vice Chair will have you, but thank you, Councillor Child, because we do need people to support us when we get these things through. Okay, yes, so moving on to item, therefore, number 5, having noted the report of item number 4 and the progress made by the internal audit team in the delivery of the audit plan. So item number 5, the internal audit plan for 2021 and 2022. So this will be the new audit plan, the new one for the new year upcoming. So once again, I'd like to introduce Rachel Ashley-Cornt as head of the internal audit to provide a brief introduction to this report. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've explained, this is in relation to the new audit plan for the new financial year from the 1st of April, that will see us through to the end of next March. And this effectively sets out our schedule of work for those 12 months and what we will be reporting back to you on as the audit committee. So we did discuss in quite a lot of depth at the last meeting and the previous meetings about the process for developing the internal audit plan. And the committee gave your support for the process that I suggested, how we develop that risk-based audit plan. So that's what I've gone away and done. That's obviously involved consultation with yourselves as members of the committee, consultation with senior management, review of your risk registers and various performance information, to do some bit of horizon scanning as well, and looking at some of the other themes that we've highlighted elsewhere as well that Melton might be able to learn from others' lessons. So following that process, I bring to you this evening our draft internal audit plan. So that's the main item within the first appendix this evening. So going towards the end of that report, we've got the full copy of the internal audit plan for you on pages 6 and 7 of that appendix. So I don't intend to go through all of the proposed assignments. For each of them, I've explained roughly the assurances that we'd be looking to gain from the audit and the reason that it's included, the number of days that we've allocated to it, and where possible, I've linked the assignment to your corporate risk registers or corporate plan, just to try and link that, as I say, align it to your risk framework. So just to draw out a couple of the assignments that might be of interest to the committee, in the first block on first page of the table, there's an audit on COVID-19 recovery. With 14 days allocated. I think this is quite a crucial piece of work that we need to do with each of the local authorities next year, just to look at not just how the authorities dealing with the recovery phase, hopefully, from the pandemic, but also anything that's changed as a result of this. So any processes that we've changed, any controls that have been removed because of different ways of working, just reflecting on those and looking at actually, are we exposing ourselves to any risk in relation to any of those, or are we happy that actually they become the new normal processes and then we can give those support going forward. Also reflecting on how the council dealt with some of the issues, such as decision making and things like handling the business grants that the chair has already mentioned this evening, which has been a big fraud risk as well. So just reflecting on some of that, but also looking forward in terms of some of the changes to processes as well. Also within the audit plan, you'll see that there is a review on the intensive housing management service, which is something that we agreed with you as a committee that we would defer from this year's internal audit overdue recommendations. We had a number of those, if you recall, and what we agreed was that we would whittle those down to one, which is dependent on the HRA business plan, and we would then do a full audit in the next 12 months. So that has been scheduled as agreed. And I think those are the two that I wanted to draw out, but I'm happy if anyone has any questions to discuss the reason for any of the inclusion of any of those audits or what we'd be looking at as well. Just to mention that after that table, on table 2, there is also a reserve list. So obviously we did have a number of areas that came to light from the various approaches that we took to developing the audit plan and identifying areas of risk. They can't all make it onto the audit plan, unfortunately, but these are the ones that didn't quite make the cut. But as I've said to you previously, it's important that we do keep the audit plan flexible. So it may well be that we reprioritise these during the financial year. And if the committee have any strong views on any of those, then that's something we can take into consideration in reprioritising if we need to. Also, just to mention, attached to the report this evening as appendix, the second appendix is a copy of the internal audit charter and strategy, so appendix B. I don't intend to go through this document in detail, mainly because it is exactly the same document that the committee approved this time last year. I haven't proposed any changes for the new financial year. This effectively sets out how we deliver your internal audit service, the mission of the internal audit team, and the processes we follow from end to end in delivering an audit assignment. So as there's no changes proposed, it is just bringing this to your attention and your review for you to approve in line with the public sector internal audit standards on an annual basis. So as I said, I'm happy to expand on anything within the reports further or take any questions on those documents. And the plan is brought to you this evening for your approval so that we can make a start on the 1st of April. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a good explanation, very interesting. Thank you to the members who did come up with some ideas, particularly Councillor Wilkinson, who was very proactive here. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. You were spot on with some of your suggestions. Right, so yes, I shall be looking for a proposer and a seconder throughout the evening as we discuss this topic. Hands raised as I'm opening the debate here. Councillor Glancy, yes, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Hi, just a question really. I've been reading all these documents and there's no time frame identified and when things are going to be rectified. And I know that Councillor Charles asked for the but when you report back, you know, there's going to be things which were within 3 months, over 3 months and 6 months, but there's no time frame identified as to when things will be put right or rectified. And I know that in the document you said you're not going to alter the internal audit charter. At 5.11, it says senior management shall ensure that agreed corrective actions are introduced. But when? And I think people are going to start asking that question. Well, yes, they're going to be introduced. I totally get that. But what time frame have we got within a period of time for corrections to be done?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Glancy. Rachel, yes, would you like to respond?
I think perhaps this goes back to the previous agenda item. Obviously, you're talking about audit recommendations at this point. So there is a deadline given for every single audit recommendation, which is agreed with management, and that's what we report to the committee against. So if you look back at the previous agenda item. All of those audit recommendations, so in tables 3 and 4, those dates that we've got in there are based on the implementation dates that were agreed for each action. Obviously, once they get into that overdue by more than 3 months, then you do receive the full details. And if you refer to Appendix 4, there is a revised date in there for each of those actions, which I think Councillor Wilkinson and Child may have mentioned this evening. So that we do definitely have a time frame for each of those, and that's certainly what we report to you at each meeting.
It's not really clear in your charter, though. That's the point I'm trying. So if anybody pick this up, think, well, actually, when do you do it by? So perhaps when you do review it next year, perhaps we need something in there within a reasonable time frame, or a time frame identified by audit, basically. I'm just picking holes, sorry.
Okay. So are you so I think it is reflected in the charter that there will be an implementation deadline for each audit action. So are you suggesting that we should impose that rather than we should? Obviously we can't set we can't say every action needs to be implemented by the end of the month, or so we have to agree that with management, because it needs to feed into whatever processes they have in place, particularly if it's, for example, in relation to approving a new policy, that's obviously then subject to going through council timetables and things. So we do have to take that into consideration. And that once they've set that date, that is set in stone once the report is finalised. And as much pressure as I get sometimes from officers, we do not change that date. So that hopefully that reassures members of the committee on that.
Because we get, well, councillors get the flack if things haven't been done by a certain time. It says on the audit it's going to be done by a certain date. Why hasn't it? When we all understand, but I'm always asked, well, is it a set date, or is it very fluid and it can be moved around?
No, it's very much set in stone, I'm afraid. As much as I do get some pressure sometimes,
as much as you can. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. That answers that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Councillor Glancy. Have you any? Oh, okay. Any members with any further questions, points to raise?
Yes.
No. Then I shall just. Oh yes. Okay, Councillor Child. Thank you.
Rachel. I'm on this scrutiny committee, as a number of fellow colleagues are, and we're on the task and finish group, and we've been looking in 2 groups of 5 at the COVID-19 issue, and how the council's responded. So when you actually do that audit, do you intend to dovetail it with our report from scrutiny, or did you know that was even happening?
Yes, so just to confirm on that, that's something that will be a source of assurance for the audit. So the fact that you've done that independent scrutiny already before we even get to do the audit would certainly be one of the sources of assurance that we would refer to.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Councillor Child. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Child?
Not at the moment.
He's turning it off. Okay. Any members with any further questions? No? Well, I'll just make a few points then, whilst I may, as a member rather than the chair. I was pleased to see the inclusion of the asset development programme which will help to underpin the council's longer term financial stability, of course, moving forwards, especially in the light of the fact that we're aiming to be more commercially aware and involved. A lot of councils are moving in that direction. I'm pleased to see leases getting a look in as well under asset management, especially in light of the recent new tenancy agreements that have been sent round. I don't know if you've seen them, they were sent round. I thought the starters and levers as regards staff members is particularly useful to be carried out as an audit, because this can be a considerable security risk. So this is a realistic and useful choice, that, and it may prove to be cost effective also. I was also pleased to see the procurement cards mentioned, because during the COVID epidemic, we've actually increased the use of these procurement cards. So we do need to double check the safeguarding around that use and the risk management. I think that was a very realistic and proactive identification of the audit need. Planning enforcement is going to be fascinating and may highlight some very interesting revelations which we can work on. And the planning service review is long overdue, in my opinion, and most welcomed by my fellow members, I'm sure. Almost finished. The topic of land charges is particularly interesting to me, because it's completely new. I don't know anything about that. I don't mind admitting it. So I shall look forward to learning more about this topic overall, and the corresponding audit and any financial implications. And finally, the housing topics in the people section are all about really protecting the public purse and ensuring that the council focuses its resources on helping those who really need it, which is what audits are generally about anyway. This is what our whole reason to be is all about. And I'm particularly pleased to see the Intensive Housing Management Service audit suggestion, as this reflects the monitoring and review of the service plan review and actions agreed in the original 2019-20 audit. So this is a revisiting previous decisions, monitoring, analysing and following through and improving even more. So yeah, I think as we move forwards, as a team, we're going to be much more, as members, we're going to be doing a lot of self-analysis as well, in the light of the recent audit changes nationwide. Anyway, I shall stop there. I think that's enough for you all to kind of take on board. Do you have any, no questions from any other members moving forwards? Just get my notes back. Here they are. You can just bear with me a moment. Okay, so I think really I would like to propose this paper. The recommendations are 2.1, that the committee notes the update for the period April the 9th, 2019 to March. Oh, just a minute. No, that's not the right one. Just a moment. My phone has broken here, but I'm getting there. Just a moment. Right, just bear with me. I have a phone problem over here. So item number 5, I'll read it from the papers then. The recommendations are that we review and approve the internal audit plan 2021 to 22. We delegate authority to the Director of Corporate Services in consultation with the Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee to agree amendments to the plan during the financial year if required. And we approve the internal audit charter and strategy. So I would like to propose that as chair. So do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Wilkinson.
Happy to second that, Jeannie.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Okay, so as a recommendation, therefore, okay. I shall now go through, I think we need a vote on this, don't we? We need to go through the members in name of order. Yeah, my equipment's now working, so I can go through the members and ask whether you propose whether you're voting for or against these proposed recommendations. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to start with Councillor Chandler.
4, but I've got very bad connectivity tonight. I don't hear half of what's going on.
Okay.
So you have to forgive me if you can't get me in most cases. I can see you all, but I can't hear a thing half the time.
Oh, bless you. Right. Thank you for letting us know that. Kieran Stockley as monitoring officer, will that cause an issue? Do you think we'll call it without Councillor Chandler's vote?
I just need to clarify how much of the debate and questions Councillor Chandler heard and whether she heard a sufficient amount to enable her to vote on the item.
Yes,
we would call it without Councillor Chandler's vote on the basis that you have 6 members present at the meeting today.
All right, we won't be quorate, did you say?
We will be quorate.
We will be quorate. So I think I had a technical problem then. Okay, so Councillor Chandler, how do you feel about this? Do you think that
I'll withdraw my vote?
Okay, that's fine, because we have 5 members anyway. Thanks for your honesty. Okay, so Councillor Child.
4.
4. Councillor Glancy.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hewson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Thank you. And myself as chair, Councillor Douglas, I'm 4 too. Thank you. I think that's unanimous, isn't it? Natasha for Democratic Services.
5 for the recommendation and 1 abstention, so it is carried.
Yes, thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, members, yes. So coming to a very important item for this evening, and the reason I was quite proactive in ensuring that we as many members attend as possible, because I think it's important for members to be aware of these. This is the statement of accounts for the year 2019 to the year 2020, somewhat delayed due to the COVID epidemic and the distractions of the audit team in having to pay out business grants and often being moved on to other jobs completely. So we now have the statement of accounts, very pleased to say, and I'd like to introduce Dawn Garton as Director for Corporate Services to provide a brief introduction to this report.
Jeannie,
thank you.
Sorry, Jeannie, before you start, I wondered if Democratic Services would be happy for Councillor Chandler maybe to try turning her video off, and it might assist with the bandwidth issues if she's having any, and at least then she can hear everything that's going on.
Yes, it does help to turn off the video so that nobody can see you, because it does improve the sound quality. How do you feel about that, Councillor Chandler?
It's a recurring problem, I'm afraid. I lose the sound at planning meetings and everything. Natasha's aware of this.
Oh, so if you turn off your video,
I think we're overloaded where I live.
So if you turn your video off, it doesn't make any difference.
Make any difference? No, okay. Not at all.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, for that suggestion, because it has worked for me in the past. It is difficult. We shall do the best we can, and we do have 6 members. We only need 5 to vote. So I do appreciate that Councillor Chandler is here at all. And when we come to the next voting opportunity, I shall ask Councillor Chandler if she considers she's heard enough, sufficient to vote, and I shall leave that in Councillor Chandler's hands. She does have the papers, so I know she'll have read them through. Okay, so yes.
The children all go to bed at any time, so it'll get better.
Oh, yes.
Because it's when they're overloading it.
Yeah, it is when you're sharing the line with other people in the house. Yes.
No, it's not in the house. It's within this area I live.
I see what you mean. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
I've got a
overload in the village.
I've got a school teacher next to me, and she's trying to teach from home. She's doing video teaching from home, and she has to go into Newark now because she can't get through to them.
It's amazing how home, working has kind of really made us look at life in a different way and work pressures and developments. Okay, so yes, we are on item number 6, the statement of accounts for the year 2019 to 20. So I'd like to introduce Dawn Garton as the Director for Corporate Services to provide a brief introduction to this report. Thank you very much, Dawn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So from the financial year 2017-18, the Council had a requirement to produce a signed copy of the accounts by the end of May, and then the audited finalised copy by the end of July. And that was a much earlier timescale than previous deadlines, and was not without its challenges in a normal year. This year, of course, as you alluded to, we've had the complication of the pandemic, and the statutory deadline was delayed, with the signed accounts required to be published by the end of August and the audited copy by the end of November. We did manage to publish the unaudited accounts by the end of June, but the end of November deadline was not achieved, and as a result of this, we did publish the required notices to that effect online. We've been keeping members informed, either by myself or by yourself, Chair, of progress. We provided some training on the draft statement of accounts in November, and I know members received an updated recording of that so they could refresh themselves of that training before receiving the report this evening. So as you said, the delay has been caused as a result of existing challenges. I think it's been fair to say anyway that existed without the pandemic, as a result of auditor resources. And as I say, this has all been exacerbated by the pandemic, and also the need to conduct the audit remotely. And I think it's been referred to members before that there has been a review, and we're awaiting the final consideration by central government on the whole of the external audit of local authority accounts and the problems that that's causing in the audit market. You'll see in paragraph 3.8 that there are still some residual issues relating to valuation of assets, which are still to be resolved, and we're still working through those, and we are reaching finalisation of them, but that will result in some changes that will need to be made to the accounts that are in front of you this evening, and therefore there is a recommendation at 2.2 giving delegated authority to myself to make those changes outside of the meeting, and then for yourself, Chair, to sign those following those changes. But just to reassure members, those changes all relate to valuations, and what they do not affect the bottom line revenue position of the council. That what they do affect is the balance sheet primarily. The accounts are all in line with the financial standards and codes of practice, and therefore the covering report draws out some of those key areas that members should be focusing on, and helps aid the understanding for members. You've also got attached as an appendix a narrative statement, and that's also there to layer on top of the accounts to aid, again, understanding of the public on the key factors within the accounts. If you look within the report with regard to the balance sheet, and there's a table at 432A, you can see that the council was slightly under borrowed against its borrowing need, as demonstrated by the capital financing requirement. And with regard to working capital and comparing creditors and debtors, you'll see at paragraph 433 that shows the ideal position for the council, where creditors exceed debtors, albeit at a slightly reduced position over the previous year, with this excess reducing. But it should be noted that with regard to the balance sheet, that is a snapshot on a particular day. You'll see as well at 434 that the council has maximised its investments, with these showing an excess over the resources available. Other than drawing out these key points, I'm happy to hand over to members for questions, and we do have a couple of members of my team as well, in case there's any questions that are perhaps a bit more technical in nature that members might want to ask.
Right, thank you, Dawn. That's a really good explanation there, nicely put across. Okay, members, yes, these are important documents. It's a massive report. It took me a long time to read it, all week. Fantastically put across, presented. I found the explanations as I was reading them really helpful. I appreciated the comparison, the inclusion of last year's accounts as a means of comparison, which is really useful. But of course, the format of the accounts is largely governed by the code of practice on the local authority accounting in the United Kingdom. But anyway, I particularly enjoyed the narrative statement at the back. It reads as a real historical, almost, portrait of Melton Mowbray. I found it really enjoyable. and most reassuring, really, as to how the statement of accounts has been put together. But anyway, members, I'd like to open the debate. Do we have any councillors who would like to contribute, ask questions? I think Councillor Child, possibly.
Go on then.
Yes.
If you twisted me, if you twisted me arm.
Go on then, Councillor Child. You could have waved. I would have looked for your wave.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for this, Dawn. Yeah, we know it's late, and part of the problem was the audit resources, as you've said. Is there any chance that we can negotiate a rebate off the fee for next time because of the delay caused by them? I'm always looking to save money, and it may well be worth asking them. So if you can answer that one first.
Yes, through you, Chair.
Yes.
I mean, you've got as your item 8 on the agenda the external auditor joining us this evening to present their audit results report, and there's a section in there around the audit fees. With regard to next year's audit, it's highly likely that those fees will be higher because of the issues surrounding audit and the resources, and certainly the LGA arm that negotiates and does the procurement of audit fees is certainly saying that there will be a general rise in audit fees to reflect the fact that resources are an issue and that the fees have probably gone too low now. But by all means, you could ask that of the auditor. But I think with regard to the late audit of the accounts, what you will see when you come on to item 8, that there is actually an additional fee for that, not a reduced fee, reflecting the additional work that they've had to put in as a result of COVID.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about the 1920 accounts, which are 6 months overdue. I'm not talking about next year's fees, which I understand the LGA are recommending to go up, but maybe a rebate off that increase.
Yeah, I'll come back to. Sorry, I think you mean 2021 because this is 1920. So I think you mean 2021.
Yeah, a rebate because of this delay in the 2021 audit.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying really, that because it's likely that audit fees are going to be increasing significantly in the future as a result of all of the issues, it's unlikely that we'd be getting any kind of rebate for 2020-21. But that's perhaps a question you could ask the external auditor when they present their paper.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Can I ask? Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled by this, Dawn. On page 103, I'm talking about investments now. On page 103, it's quite clear that the investments held at the end of March are 20.5 million. However, on page 189, during the year, investments increased marginally and stood at 20.395. And then when I look at the balance sheet, short-term investments are 14 million and long-term investments are 1.895 million. I'm just trying to reconcile the three figures. One says 20.5, one says 20.395, and the balance sheet totals about 16 million. Can you throw any light on this?
Sorry, I've managed to get two of those pages. So page 189.
There's the 20.395.
Yeah.
And the 103 says 20.5.
Yeah.
And the balance sheet has a combination of 14 million and 1.895.
What page is that on?
65.
That might be one I have to refer over to my colleagues, but whether they might take a few minutes to just go through those pages and see if there's any, whether they should be the same figure or whether there's an explanation as to why they're different.
Okay. Well, I'll move on one until they get back to you. Or are they able to answer it?
Councillor Child, through you, Councillor Douglas, is it okay if I bring through David Scott and Carol King just so that they can assist in this item?
Yes, of course, Natasha Taylor.
Lovely.
That's a really good idea.
I shall
Thank you.
do that now.
Thank you.
Yeah, evening, Chair. I think I just need to take a bit of time to have a look at those particular numbers. I've got copies of the reports, but I just need to cross-check them to the agenda paper numbers because I haven't got a full suite of the agenda. I've got the individual reports, so I just need to cross-reference those numbers that Councillor Charles was referring to. The other option is whether I could sort of confirm that via email. Sort of outside the meeting, just for Councillor Charles's and the committee's comfort in terms of it may well be that it's a difference in terms of how we have to account or present the numbers in different parts of the reports. Yes, just happy to handle either way.
Yeah, thank you, David. Councillor Child, are you happy with that? If you can, I think it will take him.
I prefer it to be done, if possible, during the meeting. If not, then it would have to be referenced by an email. But I think it's useful if that could be sourced whilst I raise one or two other issues, or not issues, but clarifications.
Okay, so you've got further concerns?
I've not got concern. I just want to ask the Director of Corporate Services one or two other questions, though. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, it might give David time to have a look at it now, but it is asking a lot of him. So I'm happy with the email, David, but we'll see how it goes. Yes, Councillor Child, if you'd like to continue with your questions of Dawn as Director for Corporate Services. Thank you.
Yeah, just on page 71, Dawn, finance and investment income.
Yeah.
On the gains and losses on the trading accounts show a decrease of 250,000. Do you know how that is made up?
Yeah, again, I'll have to refer that. I don't know whether Carol King knows the answer to that one, because she might be able to get that quicker than me. For you, Chair.
Yeah, Carol's on mute, and we don't have a visual of Carol, but I don't know if Carol can answer us, but is that all right with you, Carol?
Yes, I can't say off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
It is a big ask when you dropped in it. Sometimes you know the answer and you could have just said, but other times, and I understand, because the papers are quite considerable. There's a lot to work through. So Carol, did you actually get that query? Would you be able to look at that in your own time?
Yes, I can certainly look at that.
Okay, you don't need Councillor Child to repeat any aspect of that.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Child, for raising these queries. You have a lot of experience behind you. So do you have any further questions?
Yeah, you should be. I should be able to get an answer to this one. On page 1991, you mentioned about the valuations. I did raise this many months ago, but Innes England did not carry out valuations because of COVID. About just below halfway, the external valuers in Innes England confirmed again in May that it's still too early to try and discern any meaningful values. and that was noted. But on page 91, under property, plant and equipment, they were able to value that 31st of March 20. How come they were able to do that when they couldn't do the other valuations on the leisure centre, capital market, and the public conveniences?
Thank you, Councillor Child. Okay, so Dawn, I don't know if you're able to answer, or David or Carol at this point.
I'm still trying to find the paragraph where Councillor Child's referring to that they said they couldn't value those assets.
Yeah, page 90.
90.
Just above the wording surplus assets. That sentence there.
Yeah, I think it's talking about amended values there. So it's talking about, so they would have valued the assets without the impact of COVID. But what it's saying there is that it's too early to discern any meaningful amended values. So that's following on from the point about the impact of COVID on valuation. So I think it's talking about a different point.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay then, that's okay. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Child, and Dawn Garton for her response, and Carol too. Okay, any members with their hands raised wishing to contribute, ask a question, comment? No? No? Okay, what did I actually say about these? I mean, obviously they were late, understandably, and officially, formally, they were given a little bit longer to get them done until November. The draft statement was on the website in June, so I don't know what more we could have done. I know that the audit team, Dawn in particular, was pushing to get these completed. We were waiting for other people to come up with their contributions from outside the council. Yeah, I mean, I brought the fee up as well, actually, and we are querying that. We're looking at that. We don't. It was such a large jump from last year, and I mentioned this when I was speaking to the audit team the other day, and I'm just pleased to see that the audit team isn't just accepting blindly this amount and paying it. I mean, the auditors have given some explanation, so I look forward to learning more about that. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the accounts. I've been studying them in great detail, and I'm happy to delegate the few remaining minor outstanding items to Dawn to reconcile when she can, and because she's going to come back and let us know when she's done that and give us an update over. Is that so, Dawn? You're going to let us know what you're updating, and will let us know in future committee meetings?
Well, the revised accounts will be posted to the website after, obviously in line with the requirements. You'll be signing them off. What we can do is we could send out just a message to members of the committee, just setting out what some of those changes were. Thing is, when you do a valuation change, it can affect quite a large number of different notes to the accounts as well as the balance sheet as well. But I think if we can just say, what the nature of those alterations were and just a flavour of that, and then we can direct you to the final copy on the website if that's sufficient.
Yeah, that's fine, because they, as long as they know that they've been updated, and an email is as good as, because they get that straight away and it's quicker in some respects and it's personal too. So yeah, thank you, Dawn, that's brilliant. Okay, so members, any further points? No, I think we're I mean, really, yeah, I mean, I would like to propose the statement of accounts and the recommendations at 2.1, 2.2. So approving the statement of accounts for 2019 to 2020, and at 2.2, delegating authority to the Director for Corporate Services to make any changes to the statement of accounts 2019 to 20 following this meeting in regard to the outstanding items reported verbally to this committee to be signed by the chair and chair of audit and standards once complete. Do I have a seconder for these accounts?
Just before you move on, how are you handling my outstanding issues, Chair?
Yes, I was going to mention that. I was going to see if
Before we vote.
how other members felt about this by indicating through their vote for or against. Yeah, Councillor Wilkinson is seconding my proposal.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this, Chair. I just wondered if Councillor Childs would be happy to approve this now and allow David some more time if he needs it this evening to maybe give an update later on in the meeting at a time that is suitable to the committee. Okay. Just if David needs more time, then I would rather he took some time to get the right answers for Bob. Yeah. If Bob finds that satisfactory. Yeah.
It's a good idea, Councillor Wilkinson. I think Councillor Child, I think we'll vote. Obviously, you may want to abstain, and because David Scott will need time, you might need a few days, and Carol King too, with the questions that they've had. I think it would be difficult to defer. If they can come, if they've got any idea before the end of the meeting, that would be preferable. But I think it would be put them in an incredible position to do that. So if we could go to the vote and see how we feel and how we stand. If it doesn't get through, we can reconvene another meeting, an ad hoc meeting, to within the next few weeks, within the next month, before the next AGM. To see if we can get it through. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Child. We shall continue at this stage. So I'm proposing, Councillor Wilkinson is seconding, so I shall go through the other members to see how they feel and what they think about the statement of accounts for the last year. So Councillor Chandler, would you like to vote for or against the proposals?
I don't think we're in a position to even consider voting, Chairman.
So is that okay? Yeah. So that
we can't vote on something we don't know the final result of.
Okay, so I take that that's a no.
Councillor Douglas, could I?
Yes.
Could I just come in?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to confirm this with Dawn and Kieran's understanding as well. But my understanding is that in the recommendations, there's a delegation for the Director for Corporate Services in consultation with yourself to make minor amendments. So should the answer to Councillor Child's question require an amendment, the committee are being asked to provide a delegation, I believe, to allow that to happen. Obviously, that could be passed by the committee members as well before the amendment was done, but there is that delegation. So you could go ahead and approve, is my understanding, but you'd also be approving that delegation to make an amendment if it was necessary.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Natasha, much appreciated. Members, yeah, I mean, we have two members that have proposed and seconded this, so we are going ahead with the vote. Councillor Chandler, therefore, is it a no or an abstention, Councillor Chandler?
I still think it's wrong to be even considering voting. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So
if I went to Duncan and Topless and they gave me that load of jargon, we would walk out. We wouldn't pay the bill. It's no small businesses are paying £5,000 a year to have the accounts audited, and we wouldn't pay for that. I'll tell you, when we don't know whether what we're voting for. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
Delegated or not.
Is that a no or an abstention?
It's neither, because I'm not in a position to vote. Keep telling you.
Okay, so I take that as an abstention.
Okay, so I think that Dawn Garton wants to just come in here if that's okay.
Yeah, can I just clarify? Is the issue because we're going to have to make amendments because of the valuations that we're still outstanding, or is the concern that we haven't been able to answer the last two queries from Councillor Child? Can I just clarify what?
I think that the valuations are a concern. I can't see why you couldn't have got during COVID why you couldn't have valuations. We had valuations done last year, and I can't see why the council couldn't. And equally so, I think until we know the answers to what Robert's asked, I can't see how we can vote. I'm sorry, but I'm just digging my heels in here.
Well, that's fair comment, Councillor Chandler. I appreciate your comments and insights. Dawn, would you like to come back at that?
If I could just come back first on the valuations, we have got valuations. There's valuations in those draft accounts. So that's our view and our valuers' view of what those valuations are as not impacted by COVID. So they're the valuations at the 31st of March without the impact of COVID. What then happens is that the auditor will come along and they will audit the accounts and they will see whether they could place reliance on our valuation and whether they consider that they are a true and fair view of those valuations. And then unfortunately what you end up with is a scenario where, you know, you've got the Ernst & Young valuers querying our valuers as to whether that's the right amount, and they audit and check those figures and look at the evidence that has been provided and see whether they agree. And that's been quite an ongoing process, as I say, hindered by COVID and the availability from the auditors and the resources that they've had, and that unfortunately has been delayed. So we've ended up having to get that response from the auditors rather late in the day, which has slowed down the production of the accounts. Unfortunately, what has happened is in the last couple of weeks since these draft accounts were produced is that there is a slight dispute between some of those valuation figures between the auditors and our valuers, and we are working through those and slowly starting to provide the evidence that they need to sign off a number of those. And I think it's mainly the car parks where there is a difference of opinion and something's been picked up, and we need to change those accounts to reflect the outcome of that audit. So it's not that we can't get valuations, we have got a valuation. It's just that once that has been audited, there is an adjustment that needs to be made. And they're the sort of things that happen anyway. As you go through an audit, you will see as you come onto the auditor's report later on, as a result of an audit, they're going to find things. There's going to be differences of opinion. Some of them you adjust for, and some of them you agree that they're not material and you don't adjust. What we know is that on the car parks, there's likely to be an adjustment that is required that we're prepared to make. And we're just saying we need a little bit more time following this evening's meeting to make that adjustment and then get the account signed off. I think with regard to the queries from Councillor Child, I think you'll appreciate that this is a very lengthy document. It's got hundreds of figures in there. There is hundreds of pages of supporting documentation supporting all of those figures. Some of them were produced some time ago, and I think it's quite difficult expecting the officers to be able to just single one of those numbers out and without having the time to search through those supporting papers, actually understand how it's made up and what the retrospective figures are. So, you know, I would urge members that if you have quite technical or detailed questions like that, by all means ask the question in the meeting and have that answer in a public forum so that, you know, there's that transparency over the question and the answer. But we could have looked that up in advance if we'd have had that question in advance, and then we could have given a full response, having had time to search through all of those supporting papers to give the answer that's needed. With respect, Chair, it took me looking at these pages, and there's over 200 pages. I only got the down to the nitty gritty this morning, and it was too much to do in such a short time.
Yes, Councillor Child and Councillor Chandler, I do appreciate that. I too struggled to read it in the time I had. There was a lot. I enjoyed reading it, I found it very interesting, and I had the benefit of being able to discuss this with the audit team within the last week, and they answered any queries that I had. I had quite a few myself, concerns, but I am confident that the delegation to Dorngarten is a good idea, because the discrepancies are minor, in my opinion, not significant. And we have had the most extraordinary year with the COVID epidemic. And I've been amazed how much the audit team have achieved despite the epidemic, and how well they've pulled together. And I've seen them push to get these accounts together too, against all odds. I just think they've done phenomenally well, and I think they've actually been quite outstanding. And I thanked them a few days ago for their fantastic teamwork, and I am impressed with them actually. And so I do, however, appreciate what Councillor Child and Councillor Chandler are saying. This is what democracy is all about. They're entitled to their opinion, and I appreciate their opinion. And I suppose we are just appealing to them on the point of delegating to Dawn. And I think for me, it's about trust, but you know, you want to see the facts and the figures in front of you. I appreciate that as well. So, so Councillor Chandler is a no.
Councillor Douglas, apologies
Yes.
for
Yes.
interrupting. I believe, and I could be wrong, but through you, I believe that Carol King may want to come in to the debate at this point.
Fantastic. Yes,
Hello.
Carol,
Yes.
please
Sorry about
do.
that. I've got the answers on the two queries of Councillor Childs. So the difference on the trading accounts between 2018 and 2019, there was quite a large revaluation gain on the buildings in 2018-19, which caused a much reduced expenditure. So that's why the difference is on those two.
Okay. Did you hear that, Councillor Child?
This is the gains and losses on the trading accounts.
That's
on
right,
page
yes.
71.
Yes, so there was a large revaluation gain in 18-19, so that the expenditure was much reduced, where that gain hasn't come again.
What was that on, the revaluation gain?
It would have been on the revaluation. I don't know. It is mostly on the industrial estates.
On the industrial estates?
The majority. There is a little on the cattle market, but it is
Yeah.
the majority on the industrial estates.
Okay, thank you for that one. Yeah.
Okay, and on the other one, so on the cash and cash equivalents on page 109.
On page
109 of your pack, which is part of the 5951 on the balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
There is £1,500 of short-term deposits and £3,000 of money market deposits. So that 4,500 plus the short-term investments of the 14,000 plus the
4,004, yeah,
plus the 14,000 of the short-term investments plus the 1895 of the long-term investments, which totals the 2395, which is on your page 189. And then on the page 103, that has the property investment at its full £2 million value, which is the 105,000.
What was that, page 105?
On page 103. So that includes the property investment at its full £2 million instead of the 1895 on the balance sheet, which is your 105 difference between the 2050 and the 2395.
Right. Why do you show the 2395 rather than the?
Because that's the balance sheet valuation, as opposed to our actual investment was 2 million, but through the valuations, the actual value is now at 1895. It's just shown differently through statute, through the notes.
Right. So I think that pretty well answered it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, well. Thank you, Carol King. That is actually very quick work to come back and with such detail too. Okay, so we are recommencing the vote. I have proposed the statement of accounts at 2.1, 2.2. I have had a seconder in my vice chair of Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you, Jacob. And we're working through. Councillor Chandler, as how do you feel about that now, Councillor Chandler? What's your opinion now? Do you feel you're able to vote? Yes. Oh, I can't hear you, Councillor Chandler. I think we didn't hear you. Are you able to vote now, or would you like?
No.
No, you would not. Your decision is no. Okay, so Councillor Chandler is against that proposal. Councillor Child, how do you?
Not until we've seen the revaluations. I know you say it's minor, Chair. I'm not sure how you arrive at that narrative of minor when we don't know what the adjustments are going to be. But maybe you know more than I do.
No, I trust that Dawn Garton and the audit team, having seen them work through a pandemic in the most extraordinary of times with the most incredible pressures, I have every faith in our audit team to deliver on this audit paper. I have absolute confidence in their ability to sort this out, and I think I'm quite happy with the argument that's just been put forward by Carol King. But that's fine, Councillor Child and Councillor Chandler, if you feel you can't vote for this paper. But I do have to go through the voting with the others. Thank you. And this is democracy. I mean, I do respect your opinions, and I think it's very interesting what you're actually saying. So thank you. So actually, yes.
Apologies. Can I just ask Councillor Chandler and Councillor Child to confirm if they're voting against or if they're abstaining from the vote?
I'm basically abstaining till I get the answer.
And Councillor Child, could I ask through you, Chair, if Councillor Child is abstaining
for the same reason? For the same reason.
And you're abstaining, is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Councillors Chandler and Child. Okay, so moving on to Councillor Glancy. Are you for or against, Councillor Glancy?
Bearing in mind that we have the recommendation number 2 on the papers, I'm quite willing to vote for.
Thank you, Councillor Glancy. Councillor Hewson?
I'm struggling here with this because I suppose really I'd like to abstain because I just feel, you know, we need to have the full thing before we can actually vote on it. I'm sorry.
That's fine, Councillor Hewson. This is what democracy is all about. I keep saying it. I do appreciate your opinion. It is valid. Everybody's opinion is valid. And obviously Councillor Wilkinson has seconded it. So Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, I'm for the motion.
For, and obviously myself as chair, I have voted for. We as chair and vice chair, we have had the chance to discuss these at length within the last week, which actually makes a difference to our approach. Probably we've had a discussion at length over the last few days about these. So we picked up on different things, different viewpoints. Okay, so Natasha, I think we've lost that one.
No, Councillor Douglas, we've got 3 members. We've got 3 members abstaining and 3 members voting for the recommendation. So the recommendation is actually carried by a majority of those present and voting. An abstention is not a vote either way. So we've got the majority.
That's
of those.
gone through.
In fact, all of those members that voted for the recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. So members, thank you for that clarification. Sometimes you need the code of conduct, which is a massive folder in front of you, and you haven't got the time. But when you've got a democratic services team behind you, that is very helpful. So thank you, Natasha. It appears that has been carried, and the statement of accounts have been accepted. And I do thank you. And I think it would be really good practice for David and Carol to and Dawn to obviously update the accounts. What about contacting Councillor Child? Councillor Child, do you still need the emails for clarification? Are you all right with that?
They were explained.
They were explained. So Councillor Child and Councillor Chandler, what can we do to allay your concerns at this stage? Is there anything, what can we do to help you at this point? I mean, that is carried, but is there anything more we can do would you like any further information, advice, guidance,
Well,
phone call?
we need to look at the balance sheet in relation to the revaluation figure.
Okay, so we have accepted the accounts. We've delegated responsibility to update the accounts. So I think as soon as she's done that, we shall let you know, and you shall be made aware of them. And thank you for your contributions. It was very interesting, actually. And I do really, yeah.
Will that be all of us that will be?
Yeah. Should we have it to everybody? Yeah, we were all of us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, gosh, we are working tonight, you know, we're really working tonight. So moving on to item number 7, which is just as interesting, the annual governance statement. And I'd like to introduce Kieran Stockley, the monitoring officer, to provide a brief introduction and further update to this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is for the committee to approve the contents of the annual governance statement for 2019-20. This is a key component of the council's government can't get my words out tonight, governance arrangements. It's also a statutory requirement for the council to approve the governance statement alongside its statement of accounts. Now, a draft AGS was presented to this committee in July 2020 by my predecessor, and that provided members with the opportunity to consider it and provide any relevant comments. Now, ordinarily, the final AGS would normally have been considered at a much earlier meeting alongside the internal audit report, the statement of accounts, and also the external audit report. But as we've all heard during this meeting, those were delayed due to the COVID pandemic. Now, the version that is before members in the pack has been updated to reflect the changes since it was last presented to the committee, and that version is appended to the papers. Now, there was one element of the AGS that we were awaiting sign-off for from external audit. So there has been an addition to page 15 of the AGS that's appended to the papers. We felt it was necessary to provide clarity and transparency on the controls that we have in place in respect of 4 audits, which resulted in an opinion of less than satisfactory. And the additional paragraph was added to the AGS, and members, I believe, were provided with a copy of that final version shortly prior to this meeting today. But I think in the interest of transparency and for those watching the meeting, it might be useful through you, Chair, if I read out the additional paragraph that has been added to the AGS. So there is mention on page 15 about 4 audits that resulted in opinion of less than satisfactory assurance. And the paragraph that we've added, which has now been approved by external audit and signed off, is the council follows up on all actions arising from audit reports on a monthly basis and provide reports to audit and standards, the Audit and Standards Committee. Where an opinion of limited assurance and major impact is given, a full follow-up audit is included in the current year's audit plan, and the findings are included in the next annual report. We then go on to provide a breakdown in respect of the 4 individual audits that were carried out to highlight how many of the recommendations have been met. So in terms of the landlord health and safety audit, out of the 11 recommendations, 5 have been implemented and a further audit testing is scheduled. In relation to the case management audit for intensive housing, 1 recommendation was made and is yet to be fully implemented, but it is due to be revisited in 2021-22. In terms of the financial system, in respect of bank recs, 1 recommendation was made and this action has been implemented. And contractor health and safety, out of the 3 recommendations made, all have been implemented. And then there's a final sentence in the updated AGS that states all outstanding actions are monitored on a monthly basis and reported regularly to SLT and audits and standards. So that's been added to the governance statement just to provide that clarity and also the transparency on the controls that we have in place. External of audit have now confirmed that they've signed off the AGS with the above addition as part of the accounts and associated documents. And as a result of that, members are requested, and there's a slight amendment that to the recommendation that you'll find in the papers. So the recommendation stays the same: approve the council's annual governance statement as set out in Appendix A to this report, and the addition is with the addition that was verbally reported at the meeting. And I can confirm, if approved, the final version of the AGS will be published with the meeting, the minutes of the meeting, so that it's provided in the public domain. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kieran. Okay, over to members. Yes, I'd like to open the debate and invite you to ask Kieran any questions, any clarifying questions, pass any comments. No hands up so far. Well, shall I say a few things myself and then give you time to respond? Yeah, obviously these are delayed alongside the statement of accounts, obviously. A draft annual governance statement was presented to the committee in July of last year, 2020, which is always helpful because it's nothing new then. You've got a head start. So yeah, this is a yearly legal requirement, obviously, the purpose being to continually review the effectiveness of the council's internal control and risk management systems. I felt Appendix A made for particularly interesting reading and included most of the council's response to the pandemic as a kind of historical summary, which reads most satisfactorily, in my opinion. I found it very interesting, very enlightening, very, very reassuring. Otherwise, this is also a thorough and comprehensive report as to just how much we as a council are doing to meet our audit obligations and objectives. I must say how much I enjoyed reading this report, how reassuring it was, once again, that word reassuring. The areas for improvement table for 2019 to 2020 is a nice summary of our continued focus to meet audit requirements to an even higher standard. So yeah, I mean, I just found the whole reasoning in this report uplifting and encouraging. So I'm very happy with it. I'd like to propose it, and I will be looking for a seconder as we continue through the debate. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Wilkinson as Vice Chair.
Just happy to second this, Chair.
Yes,
no,
thank
I
you.
don't have any comments at the moment.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. I was very happy with this. I couldn't really pick fault with it. I was quite impressed with it, actually. But anyway, other members, any questions, queries? Yeah, so what I'm proposing then are that the committee approves the council's annual governance statement, the AGS, subject to the changes reported verbally at the meeting as set out in Appendix A to this report. So shall I go through you name by name? Looking for a vote on this then. Councillor Chandler. For. Thank you. Councillor Child.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Glancy. For. Thank you, Councillor Glancy. Councillor Hewson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, of course. For. And myself as chair, for, obviously. Thank you. Natasha, it is therefore
It's unanimous.
Right, thank you. No problem. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Thank you, members. That's I was really happy with that paper. I thought it was brilliant. Very, very well put together, very comprehensive. Couldn't pick fault with that. Okay, so moving on then to item number 8, the external audit annual governance report and audit options. Okay, so at this point, we're over to Helen Henshaw, the external auditor, to provide a brief introduction to this report. And I'd like to welcome Helen to a very important meeting this evening. It's good to see you, Helen. I'm glad you got on all right. And I know you are going to provide a brief introduction to this report, so I'll let you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, we're on page 233 of your pack this evening. I just want to begin by saying a thank you to Dawn, David, Carol and the rest of the team who obviously aren't here this evening, who've worked with us in order to get the audit progressed to the stage that it's at in what has obviously been an unprecedented year for us all. You know, we've already, I've already heard the commentary this evening about the pressures on audit resource in the public sector audit market, which I think are well publicised, certainly at this committee, but I think also just in the public domain, full stop. I think the finance team would also acknowledge that, you know, the COVID pandemic has certainly brought additional issues to the production of financial statements this year, and the ability to respond in as timely a fashion to audit questions and queries as they might otherwise like to, because clearly there's other draws on time, quite rightly, in terms of the public response to the pandemic. So I thank Dawn and the team for working with us to get where we are. As Dawn has already outlined, the audit is substantially complete. We've obviously got quite a detailed report here in the pack, which I will take as being read, but just point out the salient points for you briefly, if I may. So if I flick us on to page 237 in your pack, that's page 5 of our report, just to confirm in the context of the results that I'm going to set out for you this evening, our audit was conducted to a materiality level of £543,000, which is broadly in line with what we set out in our planning report. We did reassess it, or we do reassess it, based on the actual reported expenditure in the draft accounts, but it moved very little from the plan. This meant that we used a performance materiality of £407,000, and our threshold of reporting misstatements to the committee remained unchanged at anything over £27,000. Now on page 238 of your pack, page 6 of my report, we set out at the time of writing the status of the audit. And as you can see there were a number of areas at that point which were outstanding. Just to bring you up to date as at today, the first item on the list in terms of the revaluation of the assets remains an outstanding item, and we will talk about that in a bit more detail when I get to that section of the report. The prior period adjustment that you will have noted in your review of the accounts document themselves has now been concluded upon. There were a couple of prior period adjustments in the financial statements this year, and we've concluded our work on each of those, and there are no particular matters to report to the committee in respect of that. In terms of the contingent liability, my team continues to just close that out with Kieran as the monitoring officer. I don't foresee any changes in the financial statements resulting from the closeout of those conversations. The receipt and review of management procedures in reviewing the completeness of related party transactions relates to another matter that's discussed later on in the report with respect to various correspondence that I have received during this audit year from a member or members of the public with regards to declarations of interest of members of the council, which have required me to perform additional inquiries and additional procedures in respect of the related party transactions disclosed within the financial statements. The monitoring officer has been involved in all of those conversations with me and has progressed that work on behalf of the council. And I've been now in a position to see the outcome of that and flow that through to our audit work. And I'm happy that there's no amendments needed to the related party transaction notes in the financial statements as a result. The management representation letter is the letter which is written and addressed to myself and is signed by the council at the point where the financial statements are issued. So that will remain outstanding until the point where the financial statements are approved for issue. Similarly, the subsequent events review procedures have to be performed right up until the point where I put pen to paper. So they will also remain outstanding until that very final moment. Similarly, final manager and partner review, everything that changes in terms of my audit inquiries and management's response will remain in a state of needing final review until I put that pen to paper at the end. As Kieran has just presented the revised annual governance statement, and I completely agree with what she said. I'm happy with the amendment that has been added to reflect the less than satisfactory assurance ratings on some of the reports which Rachel has issued during the year. So I can now conclude that particular outstanding point in terms of the annual governance statement and the narrative report. Obviously, we will perform a final review of the financial statements when any subsequent changes have been made as needed to the assets which have already been discussed. The final outstanding point on the list is completion of our procedures required by the NAO in respect of Melton's whole of government accounts submission. Due to the relatively small size of Melton Borough Council relative to the whole of government accounts, actually the amount of work that we're required to do to report to the NAO is absolutely minimal, but that won't take place until the accounts have been finalised. So that effectively brings you up to date in terms of outstanding areas of the audit. The next little section there talks about audit differences, and I'm going to go through those in a bit more detail when we get to the relevant sections of the report. If I then just skip us on to section 2 of this report, which begins on page 240, what this section of the report does is effectively speak back to you in terms of the risks that we identified in the audit plan. So I'll just touch on each of these in turn. The first one on page 241 is the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure recognition. This is effectively the risk that the council records either revenue or expenditure inappropriately, typically in the wrong year or in the wrong place in the accounts, to effectively manipulate, for want of a better word, the outturn position of the council. This is not a risk which is specific to Melton Borough Council. Auditors are required to consider this risk on every external audit. And so that's what we did. We've performed procedures to identify if this has in fact occurred. And I can assure the committee that we found no evidence that there was any issue with regards to revenue and expenditure recognition in the accounts for Melton for 1920. The next risk on page 242, misstatements due to fraud or error, recognises effectively that management are in a unique position to override the controls put in place within an organisation to prevent fraud and error. Again, this is not a risk specific to Melton Borough Council. It's a risk that auditors are required to consider on every audit. And there are various procedures we undertake to try and identify whether, in fact, misstatements have occurred as a result of management override. We didn't find any instances of that being the case in the accounts for Melton. Page 243 talks about the valuation of land and buildings. And this is the area which, as has been talked about at length already this evening, remains outstanding in terms of our audit procedures. The council have engaged their own valuer, and that organisation has valued the assets of the council as at the 31st of March, and those valuations have fed into the draft financial statements. My role as auditor is to challenge those valuations to effectively determine, have they been based on the appropriate assumptions? Have they taken into account the valuation requirements as set out in the Code of Audit Practice? Effectively, are those values in the balance sheet at the 31st of March free from material misstatement? Materiality being in reference to the numbers that we talked about earlier. I do that by effectively probing the council and its valuer as to how those values have been derived, what were the inputs, what were the assumptions being made, how is that supported by corroborative evidence? And it's that process that we are continuing to work through with the council in order to be able to form a view. Page 244 starts to talk about some of the areas of risk which are of less significance but nevertheless important to the financial statements. And the first one is the pension liability valuation. Having looked at the accounts in detail as part of one of your prior items, you will know that the pension liability on the balance sheet is a very significant sum. and it's derived by actuarial assumptions, a small change in which can actually result in a very, very large change in the liability shown on the council's balance sheet. There were, in fact, 2 items to bring to your attention as a result of our testing of the pension liability. The first one is in respect of the McLeod judgment, which you probably recall from last year. There was a consultation document released in July of 2020, which provided some more details about how benefits would be changed in respect of the McLeod judgment. And as a result of that, management went back to the actuary and obtained a revised actuarial report to understand what the implication of that remedy would be on the liability for Melton. That gave a figure of £102,000 impact, which management didn't consider to be material in the context of the balance sheet and the overall value of the liability, and I agree. So that's not being adjusted in the financial statements. There's a related case, a Goodwin case, which also has an impact on local government pension schemes, and whilst management didn't request the actuary rerun the liability calculations in respect of Goodwin, we, based on some guidance from our own pensions experts within the firm, were able to calculate an impact of just over £107,000. And again, that's not material in the context of the balance sheet or the pension fund liability, and therefore that also has not been adjusted in the financial statements. So we'll sit on our schedule of differences as being an unadjusted amount within the financial statements. Page 245 picks up the focus on going concern. And whilst, you know, some people might say Melton Borough Council is a local authority, how can it not be a going concern? And I have some sympathy for that argument. We have to consider at the balance, well, actually at the point where the financial statements are signed and approved for issue, whether there is any risk that within the 12 months following that date, the council will not be able to meet its obligations as they fall due, services will be withdrawn, or there will be a catastrophic event likely to take place, such as, you know, the issuing of a section 114 or something similar. So we have reviewed a cash flow forecast for the council, projecting forward at least 12 months from when the accounts are due to be signed. We've looked at the forecast reserves position, and we've made various inquiries of management in terms of the way that the council is able to respond to the pressure that particularly the COVID-19 pandemic has put upon it. We were able to conclude that the going concern basis of accounting is still appropriate for the production of the accounts at March 2020, and we don't need to specifically comment on that within our audit opinion, which is one outcome of that process, if we were not able to get comfortable around the going concern assumption. Section 3 of the report it gives you a draft of what my audit report and my audit opinion will look like. Because I am proposing, following the completion of the valuation work on the assets, an unqualified opinion, and I have not qualified the value for money conclusion, which we'll come on to shortly. Actually, the wording of that audit opinion is very, very standard, so there's nothing for me to draw your attention to in there. Section 4 of the report, starting on page 253, outlines some of the largest differences which have been adjusted in the financial statements compared to the draft that were presented for audit. So I'll just quickly run you through these so that you can understand how they've been arrived at. So the cash and cash equivalents figures were found to have had an inappropriate split in terms of the classification of the short-term investment. So management have corrected that presentation and also corrected the prior year comparatives so as to match the current year and make sure that the comparability is there from one year to the next. Within the disclosures around income and expenditure analysed by nature, there were 3 misclassifications that were identified as they set out on page 253, and those have all been corrected as well. There were various issues with regards to note 3 of the financial statements, which again have been corrected. And with regards to debtors or receivables, there were some misclassification there between what should have been classified as a short-term debtor, so something receivable in less than a year, and a long-term receivable, something which will be more than 12 months before being received by the council. There was also a small amount in creditors that had an inappropriate classification between local and central government. So they're the largest in size. There were obviously various other minor presentation and disclosure issues with which we've worked with management to agree and amend it in the final statement of accounts. Just an other note, at the bottom there, we identified £16,000 worth of redundancy expenditure, which was actually in relation to a redundancy which was approved in 1819. Theoretically, that should have therefore been recorded in the 1819 year, but it's been included in the 1920 figures instead. The unadjusted differences on page 254, so these are adjustments which haven't gone through the financial statements, are just the 2 relating to the pensions liability, which I already talked you through earlier. Section 5 of the report picks up the other largest element of the external audit work, which is to look at the value for money arrangements which the council has in place. Value for money being not a great term in my own view in terms of what our work actually covers. It covers the council's arrangements in terms of making informed decisions, working with partners and third parties, and sustainable resource deployment. You might remember that when I presented the plan, we identified 2 significant risks to the value for money conclusion, and that was with regards to the compliance with the landlord's health and safety regulations and securing financial resilience. As we've gone through the year and the audit process, again, through correspondence with a member of the public and also our own research and review of council minutes, etc., we became aware of some quite public difficulties with the relationship with Leicestershire County Council in relation to the Melton Southern Bypass scheme. As you can probably appreciate, that would affect both working with partners and third parties and informed decision making in terms of the criteria we're required to consider for our value for money conclusion. And specifically, we looked at the consultation process around that bypass scheme and the accusations that it was lacking legality. As part of that work, we have reviewed the interactions between the council and the county. We've looked at the legal advice obtained. I've had various conversations with senior individuals at the council, and we were able to conclude as a result of that work that there is no significant risk to our value for money conclusion in regard to that particular matter. I know that whilst Rachel was presenting earlier, there was already discussion and questions around particularly the asbestos element of the landlord's health and safety regulations in terms of our own value for money conclusion and how that pans out. From looking at the progress that management have made to date in terms of implementing the recommendations from internal audit and agreeing actions going forward, notwithstanding the fact that COVID-19 puts an extra difficulty in the works, we were satisfied that during the year the council had got procedures in place to respond to those matters adequately. And on page 258, we just loop back on the financial resilience point and looking at those deficits that were forecast in the medium-term financial strategy over the coming years. We've reviewed the assumptions that go into the management process for the medium-term financial strategy. We've looked at the way the council monitors performance against its objectives and priorities, etc. and therefore I'm confident that we have no qualification in respect of that in our value for money conclusion. Clearly, it's important the council updates their financial assumptions continuously, given the ever-changing and challenging environment we're in. But there's no particular matters for me to bring to your attention in that regard tonight. Section 6 of the report sets out the other reporting issues that fall within the remit of external audit. Consistency of the other information published with the financial statements I've talked about. We don't have any concerns there. Whole of government accounts, again, I've talked about. There are other powers and duties that are bestowed on the external auditor, whether that be responding and addressing queries from members of the public, and other statutory powers and duties in terms of making written recommendations, public interest reports and the like. I haven't had to use those other powers and duties with respect to Melton at all this year. Page 29 just brings you a little bit more information with regards to the matter I talked about earlier that was shown on the outstanding list with regards to the related party transactions. A significant amount of work has been done by Kieran, particularly, so thank you, Kieran, to address concerns that were raised to me and also directly to the council about queries in respect of the declaration of members' interests. And the reason that features in our external audit considerations is because those direct declarations of interest effectively inform the related party transaction disclosures that go within the financial statements. And those related party transactions, when considering whether they need to be disclosed, actually you have to consider whether those transactions are material to either party. So not just whether the transaction would be material to the council, but also whether the transaction would be material to the councillor or their spousal equivalent, etc. So that has required additional work from both ourselves and the council. Section 7 of the report just makes some observations on the control environment. Now, we don't undertake a controls-based audit. We undertake what's called a substantive audit, which means we select samples of transactions to test to ensure the validity of the transactions and the amounts going into the financial statements. But nevertheless, during the process of doing that, we, invariably we may spot control observations, which we think it would be best to bring to management's attention and have them look at whether it's appropriate to address that. And those are set out on pages 31, of the pack, pages 263 and 264 of the report. I will then take us on to page 266 of the pack, which is within the independent section of this report and sets out our proposed fee for the work that's been done to perform the 1920 audit. And rather than, conscious of the committee's time, rather than have Councillor Child repeat his question on the fee, if it's all right with you, Chair, I will just address that now. So the short answer to the question, Councillor, is that I won't be in a position to offer a refund on the 1920 audit fee. The reason for that is that whilst I appreciate that the signing of the accounts is beyond the end of November date everyone was hoping for, that end of November date is a target, it's not a deadline. To put a deadline on the production of an audit opinion effectively undermines the independence of the auditor whose name needs to be put on the report. I would not be in a position to sign the audit opinion in my own name until I'm happy that the appropriate level of audit work has been done and to an appropriate standard to effectively enable you to have the confidence that my audit report and audit opinion is valid. And so for that reason, the audit needs to take as long as the audit takes in order to get done to the appropriate quality and standard. At that point, Chair, I think I'll just open to questions.
Okay, yes, thank you, Helen Henshaw, for a very full and detailed explanation of all the different sections. It really brought it to life for me. Thank you. Okay, members, I'm opening the debate and inviting you to ask questions, clarification, or give your own points of view or whatever. Councillor Wilkinson, your hand is raised. Would you like to start the debate? But incidentally, I'm looking for a proposer and seconder as the discussion unfolds. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thanks, Jeannie, and thanks Helen for going through in quite good detail. It's quite good to have you here to get a greater, you see in black and white, but to get that understanding from you guys is really good. But just on fees, you know, they have gone up quite substantially compared to last year. I'd just like, and I'm sure the committee would like, just to have you've outlined here in the report, but I'd kind of like to have a greater understanding as to why the fees have increased so substantially, nearly double than what they were last year. You know, how does this compare with your other clients with ongoing work? Given that the audit has been ongoing for quite a while, has there been issues around your team having to pick up work, having to rebrief themselves and kind of get up to speed? Has that affected the fee? And when will we know the final fee? And how much longer do you anticipate this work will take, given that it's such a big variation compared to last year?
Am I okay to answer that, Chair?
Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you, Helen. If you
can. There were a lot of questions in there, Councillor Wilkinson, so if I miss one, then please ask me again.
Yeah.
So how does this compare to other clients? The way that the PSAA contract works, of which Melton, along with most other authorities in England, signed up to, is that the PSAA contract contains scale rates for particular individuals working on an audit. So I, along with my counterparties at other, performing audits at other authorities, track in terms of time charged, how much time is being incurred in the addressing of various issues, and effectively multiply that in a mathematical exercise by the scale rate. So where things are over and above what would have been envisaged when a scale fee was set, they effectively fall into the scale fee variation bucket, which is the increase that you can see here. So there are particular triggers for that. So for example, the value for money, significant risks that were identified required additional work to be performed. That's over and above what was envisaged in the scale fee. Therefore, the hours are tracked, applied by the scale rate within the contract, and that's the amount that goes into the scale fee variation. So in terms of more detailed discussions that I obviously have with Dawn and David and the team, I provide to them more granularity of detail into what the triggers are, how many hours have gone in, and what type of hours. So is it my time, is it a specialist time, etc., and provide the calculations. It's then for Dawn to agree or disagree with me, but ultimately neither Dawn nor myself are the final decision maker in that process. That's PSAA's role as the contract holder. The reason why that it's more this year than last year is simply the amount of extra things that have come up this year that are outside of the scale fee. So there are prior period adjustments that we've had to work through this year in the accounts that just simply weren't there last year. There's a lot more work had to be done this year in respect of going concern because of the risks that COVID-19 have brought around that were not there last year. We have had significantly more difficulty auditing the property valuations this year than has been the case in the prior year. To your point about, I've had issues as well with resourcing and also with things taking quite a time to resolve and the council able to get back to us with questions being answered, etc. Of course, there's an element of picking it up and putting it down, and that breeds inefficiency. Completely, I agree with you. And Dawn and I have talked about that separately offline, and I have not tried to pass those inefficiency costs onto the council. They're quite rightly borne by UI.
And just the final point was, just the final bit, how much do you anticipate the final fee will be, and when do you think, obviously there's a reevaluation when that comes through, but kind of when are you anticipating that those issues that you have with the valuations will be resolved, and at which point will you know your final fee, and roughly how much do you think that will cost the council?
So Dawn and David and myself and the team are speaking what feels like every other day on this topic to get the valuations to a conclusion. So within the next couple of weeks would be my guesstimate on that, depending on the extent of changes and how we post those changes through the accounts. In terms of what will be the final fee, I had agreed with Dawn already that in terms of the valuation element of the fee, we would put a cap on it now and stop it keep rising. So we wouldn't put any more, on that valuation line in effect, thereby, putting the risk on my shoulders effectively.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, for your questions, and Helen Henshaw for a nice full explanation there. Do we have any further members wanting to comment, ask questions? No. I mean, this was. Oh yes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, Councillor Child. Go for it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just looking at the audit fees, I accepted. You answered my earlier question. The non-audit work and the housing benefits and the pooling of capital receipts, that was included. Was it in your reply to Councillor Wilkinson, or was that in the total audit fee on the top line? I wasn't clear.
No, sorry, that wasn't included in my response to Councillor Wilkinson. I was just talking about the audit fee there. Non-audit work is subject to separate contracts, which we negotiate with management separately.
Right. So that's likely to probably be around the 10,400 and the 5 and the 5,000, or it won't be any less.
I doubt it will be any less, but to be perfectly honest, those pieces of work are dictated by different pieces of regulation and requirements that can change each year.
Okay, yeah, fair. You're not prepared to put a figure on that?
Well, we haven't been through that discussion yet, so it wouldn't really be appropriate, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Child. Any other members wishing to speak? Thank you, Helen, for your responses. I have no hands raised. I mean, I just thought this was a really full, detailed report, and it was really good of Helen Henshaw to come along and present it to us this evening. I've really appreciated that. That's been very helpful and positive. Yeah, so I just felt that the overall conclusion was itself positive and accepting. In all respects, the audited body had proper arrangements to ensure it took properly informed decisions and deployed resources to achieve planned and sustainable outcomes for taxpayers and local people. I also appreciated the extra work to investigate the issues relating to the southern bypass, in particular to ensure that that does not or did not impact upon your external auditor's conclusion. And of course, you decided that it did not impact upon it. So that was appreciated. And I'm also interested to see how the obviously the fees issue worked its way through, because that was also an issue I raised in one of my chair briefs with the audit team. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes. And I'd like to propose the recommendation here. I mean, I'm just checking there's no further speakers. Yeah, there's no further speakers. I'd like to propose the recommendation that the committee at 2.1 notes the annual audit results report for the year ended the 31st of March 2020. Could I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Child, much appreciated. We don't need to take a vote on this because it is just to be noted. But, you know, that was very interesting. Thank you again, Helen. You really brought that report to life, and it really was interesting for me to listen to as well. So, okay, members, thank you. So we're moving on to item number 9, which is an update on the Code of Conduct, which is the new model code. Okay, to be presented by Kieran Stockley as the monitoring officer. Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be pleased that this is a very, very quick verbal update. So members will have received a copy of the local government Association's Model Councillor Code of Conduct, which was released in December, at the end of December 2020. Now, we're still waiting on further guidance on the code, and I think that's due to be issued in April this year, so next month. Once that guidance has been issued, it will be forwarded to members so that they can make any comments or review that in light of the model code that's been issued. Now, we've been doing some work with LRAC and our parish councils across Leicestershire. The National Association of Local Councils have confirmed that they support the model code, the LGA's model code, and we're currently working with parish councils across Leicestershire in an attempt to adopt a common code across Leicestershire later this year. The work will involve each council reviewing its current code in the coming months with a report to Audit and Standards, I envisage in early autumn. But I thought it would be useful to provide members with that update. So if you have any comments or queries on the code as you're in receipt of it currently, please feel free to sort of forward them to the chair or myself. That's the only update that I have, Chair.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Kieran. Members, have you any questions of Kieran at this point? And we can ask at any point at any stage over the next few months then. Just to myself and or also Kieran. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we will have, Kieran. I'm sure I will have some questions as we move forward. Or none at the moment, but that's fine because it's a new topic and we don't know what to expect at this point. So, okay, so well, we shall move on to the next item, which is item number 10. Thank you, Kieran. Which is is it any other business? Any urgent business? I don't think we've got any that's come through. No, Natasha said no, so nothing's been reported. Okay, well, I think that actually nicely concludes all the topics, all the item agenda points for this this evening. I'd like to thank you actually for attending and for the full and lively debate for this quite important meeting with the statement of accounts and the governance statement and the new audit plan. It was really important that you attended and had your input. I felt the debate was really good. I felt it was a good, in my opinion, a healthy indication of what a democratic council in action should be like. So thank you for the experienced members, your points of view, very valid, and also the less experienced members with their past professions and past personal experiences, which often represents a different slant. So, you know, I think it's been a really good evening, really interesting meeting, and I thank you again. However, I would like to announce that this meeting is formally closed at 20:42. Thank you, members.